Hello and welcome back to the broadcast. My name is Naj and today is a good day. So I'm not what I would say is a huge fan of Marvel. I mean, I dabble. I've seen the bigger movies such as the Avengers films and the occasional solo or group hero film, including the first Guardians of the Galaxy, although if you ask me what happened in that movie, I couldn't tell you. And I've played a few games, the Marvel Spider-Man, things like that. I've not seen any of the shows on Disney Plus, nor do I really intend to, nor have I really read any Marvel comics. I guess if you want to know what kind of Marvel guy I am, then I'd probably tell you my favourite Marvel movie is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. And yeah, Tobey Maguire is the best Spider-Man. Go on, thumbs me down. And because I don't really care all that much for the world of Marvel, naturally I decided to pick up Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy on the PS5 for 60 quid. Spontaneity doesn't always work in my favour, which I have learnt at my own expense of dignity, but today I have come up victorious as Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy for me was a bit like a tax rebate. I expected nothing, but actually, it gave me a whole lot. This game is fucking awesome. And as are you guys for watching from wherever you are in the galaxy. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you don't, well, subscribe anyway so you can thumbs down all my upcoming videos. Fuzzy purple llamas, telepathically communicating fluffy boys.
In Soviet Russia, Cosmo would not trust words of capitalist scum.
Lady Hellbender's thick thighs that can make any man thirsty from exotic intimidation. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy has a lot going on with this new telling of the formation of this misfit team of so-called heroes. This is a different depiction of the beloved Guardians from the recent Marvel movies and takes many more cues from the comics, or at least I can only assume that is the case, but this is an original story developed by Eidos Montreal and published by Square Enix. Our story starts with a newly formed band of heroes scavenging a quarantine zone in the Novacore sector, hunting a monster that supposedly lurks within to sell for a high price. Of course, monster hunting doesn't always go to plan, and it is the small but impactful mishaps of the team that result in being captured by Novacore, essentially the police of this corner of the galaxy, and given one hefty fine, one they must pay if they want to retain their freedom.
You're gonna pay 7,000 units in 3 cycles.
Wow, okay, that is a lot of money.
Of course, our ultimate goal isn't about paying the bills, but the events set in motion that leads to the potential destruction of the galaxy, and it is down to us to prevent impending doom. Well, hopefully. The narrative, whilst done many times before in many different ways across various mediums, is brilliant in its execution. Set in a much larger universe that I would have thought many would benefit from having an existing understanding of these characters and the world they inhabit, there is enough here to appeal to the uninitiated like myself. There is a centered story which I was thankful for given my lack of knowledge of the Guardians themselves, but the game has an origin story vibe to it without being your typical origin story, and with this it's impressive that they were able to expand my knowledge without ever feeling like there was a ton of heavy exposition, nor did I ever really feel there were gaps in my knowledge to understanding where we were exactly within this monumental world. There are collectibles in the game that provide lore, gifts you can give your fellow Guardians in which they expand upon their origins in sections between chapters where you explore the ship, engage with your crew and shut the fridge door over and over again, but there was enough within the core story to give me a good understanding of who these characters are. The writing in this game is absolute fire. Minute to minute I was completely engaged with the story, whether that be in one of the many cutscenes or within the gameplay itself. The writers really made these characters come alive, whilst that may also be due to the source material they are pulling from. There is no denying the writing is some of the best I have seen this year, and the voice acting was near enough perfect for these roles.
Need a plan.
Reconsider my initial proposal.
Oh, no, not Fin Fang Foom again.
Yes, we should go after Fin Fang Foom.
Drax, there are easier ways to get paid. Like, what about selling Gamora's crap?
What?
Oh, come on, you've been hoarding them stupid knickknacks ever since you first joined us. I mean, don't tell me they ain't worth nothing.
Quarantine zone was always
Holding out on
My
us.
figurines are not knickknacks.
Team's in trouble, and you can't be bothered to make no
Set course
sacrifice.
for the Mocking
I will
Star
sacrifice
system
your head.
and take us to the majestic mountains of Kakaran.
Real mature.
Guys!
The casting director should probably get a raise. I mean, they're so natural in their roles. And this is perhaps what is most surprising to me about this. how much I was invested in these characters. Each of the 5 Guardians have their own stories and personalities, and each of them gets a respectable amount of screen time when it comes to their own personal conflicts within themselves, and of course as a team. This band of 5 is newly formed in this story, starting with I think may even be their first job as a quintet. We have Star-Lord, aka Peter Quill, our 80s pop-loving leader who believes they can be heroes, even if for just one day. Gamora, an assassin, daughter of Thanos, which in itself brings assumptions and a bad reputation. Drax the Destroyer, a mighty warrior who seems to have more balls than brains. Rocket, who is not a raccoon but a small bundle of aggressive joy and a walking armoury. And last but not least, Groot, who is, well, Groot. Each character is fleshed out in a deep way, each pulling the heartstrings as much as giving genuine moments of laughter as we get to know them, and a lot of it is in the subtle detail. The way Drax reads a book on sarcasm, and you can slowly see his attempts at humour evolve through the game, even if he doesn't quite grasp it, but that in itself makes some cracking jokes.
It's farther than it looked. Much farther.
It's a flarkin' infinity bridge is what it is.
You're being dramatic, Rodent. Bridge ends at the fortress, therefore it is not infinite.
Yeah, that's super comforting.
All Groot says is, I am Groot, but you know exactly what he is saying sometimes due to the excellent delivery and reactions of others. There are conflicts within the group that play off in both hilarious and emotional ways. For example, if you know your lore, you will know that Drax is known for killing Thanos after his family was slaughtered, and Gamora, being the daughter of Thanos, of course, brings doubt to Drax's mind as to whether she can be trusted within the group. Rocket and Groot have a dynamic duo going on, which sometimes feel like they would be better off alone, and Star-Lord in the middle of it all trying to control this dysfunctional family. It was a very character-driven narrative, one that constantly surprised me, and these so-called heroes really aren't the Avenger role models they want to be. They rob, cheat, and kill. There is a moment in which you see their criminal record rap sheets, and these guys have been everything including merciless killers. It all adds to that inner conflict the characters face, and what makes them such engaging characters. They do want to do right, but it's not necessarily in their nature. This is what I meant earlier in that it feels like an origin story. This is ultimately their quest to become heroes, and in that, they have to find balance in accepting their past and building for the future. Even if sometimes the way to do that is to, well, rob, cheat, and kill. Within this story there is of course the big bad villain who the Guardians have to take down. Well, we've got 2 really. We have our physical foe in that of Lady Hellbender, but there is another who I won't spoil here, but even though I found the latter villain not all that interesting compared to the earlier Lady Hellbender, I think it was the right call to choose who they did, as it forms the basis of a villain who challenges our Guardians psychologically as opposed to physically, and this really helped dive into the minds of our heroes as they fight their inner demons, making for some very emotionally heavy scenes and some exciting scenarios. I won't ruin any of them here, but I think those with even a little Marvel knowledge will appreciate the surprises in store. Within the story there are even some moments that will be entirely down to the player to some extent, as the game features player decisions and branching narrative threads based on those decisions. I never played it, but there was a Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy game a few years ago, and you can see some of that rubbing off here. You will occasionally be given dialogue choices that affect the team morale, individual character opinions of each other, and will change entire scenarios based on your decisions to the point where the final act will have different characters or factions helping you depending on your relationships with them. It is not as in-depth as, say, Telltale games where you have menus for branching narrative threads with multiple outcomes, but it is a nice addition nonetheless, as it did make me feel like part of the team, giving my own input to the direction of the Guardian's journey.
You are much smaller than I expected.
Oh? And what were you expecting? Perhaps I can do something about it.
But unlikely.
We'll see, Destroyer. I can be quite forceful.
Peter Quill. I believe she is flirting with me.
Play along, man. Flatter her or something. You got this.
It's for the best. Your negotiation skills are terrible. Lady Hellbender, I can see by the size of your weapon that you must be a skillful warrior.
Now let's talk about some actual gameplay, something else that took me by surprise. Firstly, let's address the Wendigo in the room, in that, yeah, you do only get to play as Star-Lord in a game about the Guardians of the Galaxy, something that may initially seem disappointing as, you know, who doesn't want to run around as a tree man waving his branches screaming I am Groot. But in that lies a risk that, is this really a game about the Guardians of the Galaxy? Or is it more Marvel Star-Lord and 4 tagalongs? While as shown in the story, this game is about being a team, and those fears were put to rest pretty quickly. Instead of choosing or switching between characters, what we get is a third-person action-adventure as Star-Lord with team ability commands, in a way controlling all of the characters to some extent. The most recent thing I can think of that I could probably compare this to is the combat system in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was in itself a great combat system. As Star-Lord, you are equipped with dual plasma pistols, jet boots, and a mixtape of awesome pop classics, and each character has their own movesets you can utilise to bust alien ass. Primarily, this is a third-person shooter, having you run, slide, and flip while shooting your laser pew-pew guns. It's simple, but controls well. However, just using the guns alone are not enough. This way, the enemies can seem a little bullet spongy, but this is where the character abilities would come into play. Those at the business end of your attacks have their health bars as well as a stun meter. To get the most damage, focusing on the health bar is just not enough. As you progress through the game's 16 chapters, you will accumulate skill points from XP gained through the game's combo meter that splurts words out at you like nice and marvellous. Think the Devil May Cry combo meter, and the more variety you put into your attacks, the quicker the meter will go up a level, ultimately leaving you with more XP at the end of a fight. With the skill points earned through XP, you can distribute them amongst the 5 Guardians, giving them more advanced abilities. It is these abilities that will shame the enemies as their stun meter fills quicker, incapacitating them and allowing for more damage as they sit there in the corner twiddling their thumbs taking all of the abuse. Star-Lord's abilities are focused on long-range attacks. He can charge his pistols for a much stronger shield-breaking hit, or another that allows him to fly and shoot on the go for a longer period of time, making it easier to evade, amongst some others. As you progress through the game, you will also unlock elemental abilities for Star-Lord's guns, wind, ice, shock, and plasma, which are used for puzzle solving whilst navigating the levels, and on enemies as each enemy type has a different weakness, prompting you to switch out elemental abilities on the fly with the directional buttons. For example, the shield guys are weak to ice to stick them to the ground, and it is gameplay like this that then allows you to use the Guardian's abilities to form some combos, shooting up that XP bonus. If you do choose just to fire all hell at the enemies, you do have a cooldown meter for your guns, which you can override with a button prompt in this Gears of War reload mechanic. Well, I say Gears of War, but I guess this is now used in a load of third-person shooters that it's become a bit of a genre trope, but here it is. The other Guardians do have their approaches to combat, Gamora using her assassin skills to dash between enemies, slashing with her katana as she goes. Drax, being the brute of the group, is able to ram hordes of enemies or throw an individual one into others. Rocket, being the explosive and firearms expert, throws grenades that can pull hordes of enemies together, or pulling out everything he has and just goes blasting until there is nothing left. And then Groot is more of a support class, being able to hold enemies down with his branches, lining them up for attacks, or he is also the team's healer. All of these moves are activated by holding L1 and then selecting the character you want and then the ability that you want. It can be a little fiddly at first, but you get used to the layout pretty quickly. Each Guardian essentially has their own class, and it can be very fun to play around with, especially once you have learnt the best ways to command the team and lining them up for abilities for some pretty heavy damage output. Each character does have a cooldown, so the moves cannot be continuously spammed, but when they are cooling down they will still engage in combat in their own way. It is a very good combat system. Not too original, but fun nonetheless, and quite surprising to see that's the direction that they took with this. Perhaps the greatest weapon of all though is Star-Lord's vintage cassette player. As you build up the combo meter, you will also build up the huddle up meter. By clicking L1 and R1 together, you get the team to huddle together, which can only be described as a huddle before a football match. But assuming the enemies just stop fighting whilst you discuss your tactics, the group comes in and you have to choose the right prep response based on the team's mood. If selected correctly, this will grant a huge bonus damage to all of the Guardians as well as revive any downed ones. These are pretty good, as I just love seeing how fired up they all get sometimes, especially Gamora having the time of her life, and it just contributes to the fact that our characters are in fact assholes that love to see their victims suffer, but lovable assholes.
One little mistake is gonna bring us down. So let's get back out there, give this fight complete dedication, and make them scream. Who's with me? Feel my wrath!
Yes!
Once their egos have been fingered, Star-Lord will play his mixtape, and a song you will likely recognise will play over the top to get you in the flark and mood for some killing. I mean, there's nothing more blood pumping than blowing out the guts of the corrupt Nova Corps officers whilst power sliding across the floor to the beat of Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. The game's soundtrack, both with its chosen licensed music and original score, are brilliant. And although for me the final boss was a little underwhelming from a gameplay perspective, I don't think there has been a better use of Europe's The Final Countdown in a video game since Saints Row 2. One annoying thing I did find with this though was the trigger for it, L1 and R1, which alone are the buttons for either the team commands or the elemental firing mode on your pistols. I can't count the times I accidentally triggered the huddle with say one enemy left when I was saving it, due to the buttons constantly needing to be pressed that it was just too easy to accidentally press both at the same time. Kind of annoying when you've wasted a good song. And whilst the combat mechanics are decent and more in depth than I expected, I also feel that with this style they could have gone a little further with it. Around 2/3 into the game I had maxed out all character abilities, so we were what you would expect, unstoppable, even on hard mode, which felt good for a time using all the abilities to reign supreme on the intergalactic battlefield. But I did soon start to miss gaining XP and felt more character progression would have been welcome. As soon as you gain all abilities, of which there are 4 to gain for each character, you just stop accumulating XP, making not only the combo meter kind of redundant outside looking cool, but there is nothing to work towards within the gameplay other than seeing the story unfold. This could have been resolved by adding a few more abilities, maybe even some combo abilities between the Guardians, combining moves into one overkill takedown. You do get a button prompt to do takedowns on enemies when they are stunned and near low to health, but other than pressing that button there really isn't any control over these, nor did I find a way to choose who to do these with. They just appear to be random with the same couple of animations. And I do get this is a weird comment calling a game's combat more in depth than I expected, but still a little too simple. Whatever, it's how I felt at the time of completing the final stages of the game, but in no way did it ruin it at all. It was still a very fun experience. An enemy variety prevents the gameplay from becoming sterile, and there are some pretty funky creatures you'll be blasting into oblivion, including some pretty cool boss fights. From square jellies to giant robotic priests, nothing ever outstays its welcome, and things are kept pretty fresh throughout. It's super hot stuff, and speaking of hot, the game's presentation comes straight out of the oven, piping hot, but some may feel it looks like a tasty pie, but when you bite into it, you'll find that it's pretty hollow, which leads me to my kind of other complaint, I guess. The game literally takes you across space to an assortment of Candyland looking planets, and they are gorgeous. War-torn planets, the seedy neon-lit streets of nowhere, the wilderness flowing with torrential rain, even just the canvas of open space is a pretty sight, but this is what it is. A canvas hanging on a wall that has a big "Don't Touch" sign next to it. You are playing in these large planets and complexes, but you are restricted to, most of the time, the straight and narrow path. We are not guardians of the corridor shooters after all, but of a supposed galaxy. The level design aesthetically is fantastic, each level having a distinct look, which really helped give the feeling I was on a journey of a galactic scale, but I would have just liked a little more freedom within those locations. There were times I was walking through at an incredibly slow pace, taking in the sights thinking, damn, wish I could go there, or ooh, wish I could do that. Luckily, these sections were never boring due to the witty characters in my party, and I am 100% not saying this game should have been open world. Absolutely not. I mean, if anything, it shows games do not need to be open world to have depth to them. Good story and characters in games can have so many more layers than a large video game world. We've seen that in countless games. I mean, some of the best games of all time are linear, story-driven games. But think perhaps Ratchet & Clank. A pretty similar world as far as galaxies are concerned, and each location was a sandbox you could explore. Nothing too large or off the beaten path, just something to make the locations feel less railed when you're presenting us with this huge galaxy. I think this title would have been perfect for that. Who knows? Maybe in a sequel we'll see some added planet traversal. We even get a glimpse at flight missions, and this really is a small glimpse, as I think there are about 2 sections in the game where we have spaceflight combat, something that did break up the regular gameplay quite nicely, and yeah, I would have liked to see a bit more of that as well. Unlike the trusty Milano, however, though, the game did crash and burn on me a few times in my playthrough, such as button prompts staying on screen at all times, and a couple of occasions where I would finish a combat encounter, but the game wouldn't register that I'd actually killed everyone, so I couldn't progress. I was running around aimlessly looking for the final bad guys, but they just weren't there. I had killed them all, and the only way to do this was to reset the game. Things like this did happen pretty often, which led to a few frustrating moments, but something I'm sure a patch will fix if it hasn't done already, but still that's no excuse, it did happen pretty often. But I digress. With the technical issues and I guess my complaints on some of the game design taken into consideration, the pros absolutely outweigh the cons here, especially considering my complete lack of hype surrounding this game. And I don't think I am alone in saying that, considering Square Enix's abysmal launch of Marvel's Avengers last year that went down like a lead balloon. But I guess that was also a different developer, so what we get here with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic, heartfelt, story-driven experience with enough fun gameplay to see you through. I just hope people aren't put off this game due to the reputation brought with the previous Avengers failure, because this is a massive recommendation from me, at least, if that means anything, regardless of your own affinity with Marvel as a whole. Shit, maybe if this kicks off, we'll see the start of the MGU, the Marvel Gaming Universe. You heard it here first, but I guess if that was the case, then we'll probably have to sell a kidney to afford to keep up with Phase 1, let alone 26 games.